But I'm glad you said that about the question can be redundant. And so when you look at the screen now, I said tip to think about. And so I want you all to read and notice the details in each question. And right now, as you are on this call, just take some notes on some things you may have to go back to your previous SPED courses so you can remember some things. And so this is the time where you have to put research to practice. Like you can study, you have all the materials, but mine through that and figure out how can I take what I learned and apply it for different types of scenarios. And we're going to talk more about that later, but I just wanted to see what you're feeling, you're thinking before we dive into the workshop. So thank you all for participating.
I have one more thing to add.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
No, this is
I will say this. If you have not taken SPED 7000, or if you're currently in SPED 7000 right now on the master's levels course, taking it, I forgot what the professor's name is, a real nice older lady. That class really has a lot of information that's on the SPED Praxis test. And I see why they say in the MAT program, like after that first semester taking SPED 7000 to take the test, because it was like a lot of things that were asked on the test is from SPED 7000. So that's really good.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, I actually had a grad student, not from this university, for another one, who took a classroom management course under me, and some things that I was telling her and all of that. And she's like, you know what, I finally passed the test because we really went through like, how can you apply what you know to this test? So we're going to talk about that later, okay? And I'm going to definitely put my information in the chat afterwards. All right, so here's some things that I know you're probably familiar with, but just make sure that you take note, because they, like someone said earlier about autism, you really need to dive deeper into autism. So let's go ahead and get started with the SPED workshop. So here are 13 categories: autism to blind or visual impairment, and also zero reject. So when you're talking about autism, can anyone just share out a couple of things about autism? Don't be shy. This is not a test. There's a couple of things.
I know that
any characteristics.
I know that there's a spectrum that you could. I don't want to say the inappropriate thing, but I know that there's a spectrum.
Right. It's a large spectrum. Think about a rainbow, right? The arching rainbow. You have one low end, and you have the high end of the spectrum. So very good. Anyone else?
Repetitiveness, like they're very I can't even think of the word, but I think it's like they're very repetitive in certain behaviors. I know for a fact because I work with those kind of kids.
Right, they need consistency, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Definitely. They need that.
Their social interactions can be, I wouldn't say almost non-existent, but I would say close to it with some children who are on the autism spectrum. Their social interaction will look very different than someone who is not on the spectrum. So.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also different than girls and boys. Some girls are, especially African-American girls, are highly social than boys. And sometimes our girls get misplaced because they're social, but they actually have autism because of other reasoning. So all these things that you're saying are great. Anyone else? What about emotion disturbance?
Isn't that usually caused by like trauma?
It can.
Most of the time, this is Cameron. I'm driving, but I can talk. Children, I currently work with children that have ED, and so what I see with a lot of them is they have other health alignments along with autism. I see a lot of ADHD, impulsiveness. I see a lot of somebody said trauma. The majority of them have trauma that I've dealt with. And they they do a lot of outbursts. They also have, lately, the ones I've been receiving have a low cognitive level as well.
Yes, that is so true. For ED students, they're most common in this area because of the trauma. And when you go to certain areas, may not be the traumatic experiences that they face on a day-to-day basis. This could be something that occur, and we have to figure out how can we replace that undesired behavior with the positive behavior. And I actually, because you may have a scenario regarding ED students or students who may have conduct disorder. That's another disability that's under the new DSM-5 regarding behaviors. Do one more. Let's do SLD real quickly. Any characteristics or any facts that you know about SLD?
That's your speech and language.
I'm sorry.
Did you say SLP?
Specific learning.
SLD.
Did you say SLP?
Specific learning disability.
Oh, I thought you said speech and language.
It's okay.
That would be learning disability where they have trouble with either written or spoken or thinking or even performing math. I mean, it depends. It varies, right? That could be things like
The three major categories: be reading. What else?
Math, writing,
and
Yeah.
writing.
yeah.
And it's also one of the largest, what?
learning disorders.
Yes. Disability out of the 13 categories.
I know for my middle school clinical, my mentor teacher had like 8 kids, and all of them had SLD, just because they were all below grade. I mean, these are 7th graders having 2nd grade reading levels, and so most of them, I just know that from what he told me. But yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine. Usually if you are 3 grades below, you can be classified as having an SLD diagnosis. Anyone else want to chime in on SLD? All right. What about zero reject policy? This is kind of new to me. A few years ago, we didn't call it zero reject. We called it something else.
Is the zero reject more like a no child left behind kind of deal?
It is kind of like that. Anyone else want to chime in on it?
It's just that they have to get an appropriate education. Like we can't say they can't get that public education.
Right. It's one word that you forgot to put in there. Start with the F.
Free, free.
There you go. Right. Free appropriate education, which is zero reject. We used to call it FAPE. They still call it FAPE in certain areas, but zero reject is one. Appropriate evaluation. Anyone want to chime in on that?
They're evaluated based on what their needs need to be, or what they need to. Am I on the right track? I have no idea.
Right, providing the appropriate assessment for the student,
Okay.
regardless of their language. Okay, and also it doesn't matter what type of area they in. Like, for example, most of us probably in the Memphis area, and sometimes, well, from my experience, I have had students who did not receive appropriate evaluation because of their cognitive abilities or the school funding, and so that's important to advocate for those type of students. But yes, appropriate evaluation, make sure that the students are receiving the appropriate evaluation that fit their needs, not based on their disability, their socioeconomic status, their race, religion, ethnicity, all of the above. Moving along, least restricted environment. That's a great one. Because I know for a fact this is on the test as well.
Is that the environment where students are placed with their non-disabled peers?
There can be, but be more specific about that.
The environment that is best for the student, for their disability.
Right, so both of you all Correct. So you may have a student who is SLD and they may be in an inclusion setting with their non-disabled peers. However, we have to figure out what best for the student. So if a student may be ID in his best placement, least restricted environment could be a functional skill classroom setting opposed to having him being pushed into the inclusion setting. Does it make sense to everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
I do have a question.
Okay.
This is regarding to the recording. Are we able to get the recording afterwards?
Yes, I'm pretty
Okay.
sure Ms. Perkins will send you all the recording.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. You're welcome. The individualized education is basically the what for SPED?
IEP.
Is it IEP?
The planning.
Right, the individualized education plan, the IEP for that particular student. So make sure you know the components of each IEP, as far as the goals or objectives. Anything else that I'm missing? I'm missing a lot, but I just want you all to know. What is else for the IEP that encompasses the IEP?
You have to have present levels, and then you have to talk about progress, how you're going to track that, and amount of what instruction looks like how often, when, where it's going to be delivered.
Yes, very important information. You have to have the current present level of education performance, and also measurable learning goals if applicable, but you make sure you have your annual goals there. What about parent participation?
You want to include your parents in everything, every meeting that you have. Their input is very important because especially it's their child. If they have to reschedule it,
Yes.
work with them as much as possible, because at the end of the day, that's their child and they're going to advocate for their children. Even though we love them to death, we still need the parent input.
Absolutely, great answer. And the last one, procedure safeguards.
Must be given to parent at the beginning of every meeting. It's a little booklet, tells parents of their rights as a parent to due process. If they don't agree with the term, if they don't agree with any parts of the IEP for their students or evaluations for the students.
Yes, right. It has to be provided to the parents, even students who are suspected of having a disability. The school must provide a procedure safeguard booklet for the parent or guardian. And then just a reminder that the 13 categories provide access to special education. They do not determine the support and services provided in the IEP. The IEP team provide the support and service. They determine what this child needs. Remember, it is individualized. All right, the content of the exam. I'm pretty sure those who have already taken it, you've probably seen this countless of times of what is what on the Praxis exam. And so you have developments and characteristics of learning, the planning, the learning environment, instruction, assessments, foundation, professionalism, responsibility, and the constructed responses. Regarding development and characteristics of learning and all the others, make sure you go back into your syllabi to check and see exactly what you need to revisit in regards to human development, any laws and regulation, how planning occurs, also assessing the students. Summative and formative assessment are really big. I can't tell you how many times I have to reiterate the difference between summative and formative assessments. Also, far as regarding assessment, how many times a year should a child be assessed for a present level of performance?
3 times a year, or the beginning and the end?
For IEP purposes, at least once a year. At least once a year. And every IEP is annual, so you at least once a year. Now, for your summative assessment or when you're trying to do universal screening, the school should have an exam at the beginning, the winter, and the springtime. So those are your 3 times for assessment for your student to track the data to see if any progress has been made. Does anyone have any questions as far as development and characteristic of learning section?
No, ma'am.
I was gonna say, when I took the test, it doesn't tell me exactly what I missed on the test. It just told me like basically like what percentage I got in the area. So it's kind of hard to say put like which questions go with which area, because that information wasn't shared, or like it just basically it just had a score for each category.
Okay. Was it like a small score, a small percentage? Because usually that section is talking about theoretical methods that I use. So you can go back into, I know they don't really show you pinpoint exactly what you missed, but if you can go back and do your courses or notes and things of that nature and figure out what theoretical methods were used or are applied for the SPED students, and also like academic and social language components, things of that nature could help you as well. And also I think it's on language and culture, like cultural responsiveness and like the family system, the family dynamic for our development characteristic of the learner is on there.
Definitely questions about English learners. There's questions on there about that, like what makes like why wouldn't you give an IEP to a student with the learning, not with the learning, but you know, someone who's learning a different language or something like that. It's questions on there about that, and it's in the book. I forgot the actual question, but there's definitely questions about what you're saying, the culturally diverse and everything like that.
Yeah, so make sure you all take a note and go back and because I think it's one of the questions about the students who are ESL learner have access to a test that is only English. You know, can you deny them services regarding that? And the answer is no, you can't deny them services. What about planning and learning, the learning environment? Does anyone have any questions about that?
What kind of questions would that like fall under planning in the learning environment? Because I know there are a lot of questions about the alternative teachings, that like the different kind of styles of teaching, like alternative, like the different co-teaching,
yes, co-teaching's on there.
And all the, like I would say it's about almost, feel like it's about 15 to 20 questions about that. And see, it's like if you don't know one answer, you get a lot of those answers wrong. So
yes, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. So you have to go back into your notes about co-teaching strategies. And there are 6 co-teaching strategies. Anyone can name all 6?
I'm looking it up in this book that I got from SPED 7000.
I know one is one teaches, one assists like specific students. So it's kind of like you break it up, and then or observing, like so I guess
One teach, that means one person is teaching and another person is assisting the students around them. So that's one.
Parallel teaching.
Parallel teaching, what does that consist of?
When it is necessary to lower the student-teacher ratio, means both teachers teach the same content to 2 equal-sized groups. And so how I remembered it, how I'm going to remember that is like a pyramid. Like if you think about it, pyramid, parallel, like all angles in a pyramid are equal. I don't know, like that's just how I remember it. It's pyramid parallel means that the teachers, they teach the same content in 2 equal groups. So I think about a pyramid when I think about parallel. That's how.
Okay, well that works for you. I usually think of a classroom. One teacher is teaching that class and another half is teaching another group of students. So however you want to teach, they both teaching simultaneously. So it's half and half. All right, so that's 2. What's another one?
Station teaching.
Yes, station teaching. Very good. Rotating different activities. One of the best co-teaching strategies to implement into the classroom. All right, what's the next one?
alternative teaching.
Alternative teaching, what is that one? Anyone?
When teachers need to individualize instruction, or remediate skills, promote mastery, or offer enrichment, one teacher works with a smaller group or individual students, while the other teacher works with the rest of the class. So basically, it's like a whole classroom going on, but then another teacher takes out a smaller group to work with a group.
Absolutely. Or you can work with the group in the back of the classroom.
Would that be considered what we do as intervention, working with the smaller group? Okay, okay.
Absolutely, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Because you just remediating what you already taught for those students who are struggling. So absolutely. All right, anyone else? The next one, we had 4, right? Trying to keep up.
I see team teaching.
Okay, team teaching, what is that about?
When it is desirable to blend the talent and expertise of teachers, both teachers plan and teach a lesson together.
Yes, so basically you're just teaching together. One person can be responsible for direct instruction. The other person can be responsible for the we do section, the group section, and you just, feed off each other's vibe and help all the students, all the learners. All right.
I want to pinpoint. Okay, I want to pinpoint 2 of the co-teaching strategies that people may get confused with. Okay, the one that says one teaching, one helping. Okay, one teaching, one helping means that one teacher is teaching the whole class and the other one is walking around. So I would say that one talks, one walks for that one, basically. So one walks, one talks, with one teaching and one helping. But the alternative teaching, like one teacher is actually teaching the whole class and the other one, and the other students are learning with another teacher. So the difference between the one teaching and one helping versus the not team teaching, versus the alternative teaching is that one teacher is walking, but on the alternative teaching, it's basically both teachers are teaching, but a teacher is taking a smaller group out, basically.
Yes. And one helping can be considered as one teach, one assist. Thank you so much. And what's the next one? It's one teach, one observe, right? This is the least favorable one, but what is it called? What does it encompass?
So one is teaching and one is collecting data, basically, just, on the side.
I'm glad you said that part. Collecting data, observing the teacher, observing the students, right? That's what you're supposed to do. Not just sitting down on the phone, right? Just observing whoever, but yes, collecting the data, whereas academic behavior or academics or behavior. So very good. What about
Can you say that one again? Because I've only got 5 in this book. So you said the 6th one is what?
One teach and one observe.
Okay.
Yes, there are 6 co-teacher models.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else have any questions before we move on to the next one? Assessment. Okay. So for assessments, you all need to use evidence-based practices. And so from your previous courses, I'm pretty sure you all have talked countless about using evidence-based practices and also activity sheets and things of that nature. And does anyone else have any question about that component of evidence-based practices and instruments that you can use to collect data? And also formative and summative assessment goes under that category as well.
Okay.
So the difference between the two, formative and summative?
Formative would be if I do a lesson today, by the end of the lesson, we would have done, let's say, activities, or if they working in their workbook or whatever they're doing in the classroom during the lesson. And then by the end of the lesson, there should be some type of exit ticket or some type of assignment that shows or proves what I've taught can correlate onto paper from today. If that makes sense.
It does. So formative is actually you just collecting data during the lesson. Like your do now, that's a type of formative assessment. We do assignments like during our group work, that's a formative assessment. Do you understand what I'm saying? Thumbs up, thumbs down, that's a formative assessment. And also your exit tickets are formative assessments. Your weekly assignments, that can be formative assessments as well. Now, your summative assessments, who can give a couple of examples of summative assessments?
Exams.
A test at the end of the week, like at the end of the unit.
Yes, the unit exams, your midterms, your final, your state tests, those are considered summative assessments. Very good. What about the foundation and professional responsibilities?
I will say, going back on the formative and summative assessments on the test, the terminology curriculum-based measurements is on there. And that was something that I wasn't familiar with or whatever, but it's also called progress monitoring. So that's actually on the test too.
It goes back to your assessment. Unlike iReady, does anyone have heard or used iReady? That can be a CDM. So that will be considered like a summative assessment to track and collect the data of the student, to progress monitor that student. Thank you for bringing it up. Anyone else have a question going back to assessments? So that's very important. You have instruction, planning, assessing. All three components are important for teaching and for the Praxis exam. Chloe, you were saying something?
I was about to say, criteria. It was so many questions. Lord Jesus.
Criterion references.
Yeah, Criterion a references test. Just I know that I was asked about that, like basically what is it used for? Why, something like why or what it's used for. I believe, yeah, that's on the test.
Right, and so those criteria references tests could be whatever the SPED teacher or the school use. Like, for example, we use the KTEA assessments, where Memphis City School use that, Shelby County School use that, just to assess the students where they are as far as their grade level, and also which type of assessment used to determine what type of disability the student has. So you have all those different type of measurements to determine what factor the student is located as far as the grade level and also the disability. So definitely go back and to figure out all those different types of measuring tools to determine the type of disability the student may have, like the Woodcock-Johnson test, we use it a lot, and also the KTA. There's a different other methods you can use, but just make sure you do know the terminology for the Praxis to determine exactly what they're saying, how you would diagnose the students, or how will you determine what present level the student is actually on currently. Great question. Anyone else?
Okay, I got a question. What does tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3, what does that fall under for the categories of the test?
Okay,
because
so
I got it highlighted, and I know that there was questions on there about that in this book.
yes, so assessments, because at the beginning of the year, you would have universal screeners at the school, like iReady. I say iReady because I think most of the schools in Memphis or Shelby County use iReady to gauge and see where the students are at. And so you had that pyramid you were talking about, someone was talking about, where you have tier 1, right? And then all students, SPED and Gen Ed. So we really don't even say SPED, we just say Gen Ed because they're Gen Ed first, right? And then if they are struggling, you know, then we have to do more intensive support for the students. And so they're tier 2. And then those accommodations or tutoring is not working, Then we go to the most intensive, which is tier 3, the triangle at the top. That's your tier 3, where you have your students who may be referred for special education or already in special education.
Yes, ma'am.
And it also go with not RTI, of course, but you have RTI B for behavior. And so we use that model also for tracking behavior, which type of behaviors they're on, 1, 2, and 3. Great question. Anyone else? And so when you have your assessment, your data, they may ask you a question like, okay, you have your data is collected, right? So what instruction are you going to use? So it's how you going to formulate and how you're going to create their individualized instruction for your students with exceptionalities.
Mm-hmm.
That goes to your foundation and professional responsibilities. So we know about the RTI and students with exceptionalities and who's responsible for X, Y, and Z. So that goes under your 13 categories, your federal laws and things of that nature. Does anyone have any questions before I chime in some more with that?
They did ask on there, how do you prepare for a IEP meeting?
Okay. Does anyone know how to prepare for an IEP meeting?
I really, honestly,
You have to. Oh,
No,
sorry.
ma'am.
The first thing you have to do is, I usually call parents and ask them for their 2 best dates. And then from there, you send an invitation to the parents for the IEP meeting. And then you kind of can draft the meeting, because on the invitation, it will ask you, or the parents may ask you, can I have a draft of the meeting? And so you would have to draft the IEP meeting. And basically that's going back to the stages of the IEP meeting, the narrative for my kids, if they're on medication, you'll put, updates and changes. It's just a draft. So even when you're in the meeting, you can always make changes to it. Their present levels, those test scores that she was speaking of, like those I-ready scores, if they don't take the I-ready, the KTEA, fast bridge, whatever testing and the results that you got from that, all that information goes in there. Their present levels, their goals, how you're going to measure them, who's going to be there, any related services. Then I think I remember that question. And then it was the other part was, there's like 4 parts basically: the invitation, the draft, the minutes. And when I say the minutes, it's like, you're actually writing what you're stating. You have to do an introduction. Before you do that, you have to make sure the parents get at the meeting a procedure safeguard. You go over that with the parent. There's a sheet that they sign. Then you make introductions, and then of course you take meetings, just basically what the meeting's about. And then you create a prior written notice at the end of the meeting. Most of the time it's handwritten. They don't like it to be typed, because sometimes people type it prior to the meeting, and that's kind of not how you're supposed to do it, but life happens. And then so once you do the prior written notice, you have to get signatures. Everybody has to sign whether they agree or disagree, and then there's a little box for them to check agree or disagree. And then there's paperwork that you have to fax in the end. Like we have to upload ours, so we have to upload it, and then it's up for review. You have like 30 days if you wanted to make an addendum, that you can make an addendum to the meeting, to the IEP, without having to, you always have to contact the parents, any changes that you make to a child, but you don't have to like bring everybody back to the table if it's within 30 days. But that's what they call an addendum. So the parts of it is the invitation, the draft, the minutes. I would say the minutes and the prior written notice.
Yes, that is true. I'll add some more stuff to that, but yes, the main thing is like to make sure you have the most important people at the table, which is the parents, of course, the LEA, the gen ed teacher, and the SPED teacher. And if the student has related service providers, then you definitely invite them as well. Now, certain school districts, they don't have minutes, but they have to draft a prior notice before the minutes, before the meeting to take to the parents. So you have to draft prior notice, to draft IEP to deliver to the parent. But the main thing is ensuring that you know who's supposed to be at the meetings. Great question. And thank you for that synopsis, Cameron. Anyone else have a question about the IEP?
Thank you for that, because I did not know any of that.
Yeah, the IEP within itself is a lot that encompass, especially when you work in large school districts, such as the Memphis-Shelby County schools and other districts in the area, where you have to give the prior notice, the draft prior notice ahead of time, and also the IEP, and also make sure you have encompassed and written out everything that's in there. And regarding the procedure safeguard, that's a must. They need to sign off on that. So I'm glad you brought that up, Cameron. Anything else as far as the foundations and professional responsibilities? What about the strengths and weaknesses of the students? I know that's a question on the test as well. Nope. All right, integrated constructed resource response.
Okay, those questions,
That's-
the ones, are those the ones that you have to write, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it was a question about okay, on my test, I don't know about anybody else's test. On my test, it was a question about a boy. I believe he had autism, but he also had speech problems, and he had vision problems as well. They asked what is like the best strategy for him. And I definitely put he needs to sit in the front of the classroom, and he definitely needs large text. And what else I put on there? And also maybe speech to text technology.
Assistive technology.
Yeah. So I put that on there. But
Okay.
I don't think that's the question I even got wrong, because I know I did good on that question. It's probably the multiple choice question.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's best to write exactly, especially what the definition is for each word. Like assistive technology, they need those words. What type of strategy are you using? What type of co-teaching strategy? What type of accommodation and modification? And so that's why I stated earlier, it's best to write down, what are you practicing now, or what are you going to practice as a SPED teacher? And so they were looking for the best appropriate answer, not just something that's textbook based, but something that what is actually going to help the student.
That's one of the main things about taking this test. It's like really, it's stuff that we do every day, but just seeing it in words and actually just answering questions about it is just a little different. But definitely it's a lot of, somebody said this before, like it's basically common sense in a way, but it's like, yes, common sense, but at the same time it's in different kind of knowledge, in different language, so it's just a little different.
More jargon focus for SPED teachers, I would say. So you definitely have to use what you learn and write what you're going to do for that particular scenario. And this is basically what we just went over. I just broke it down about the human development. Just make sure you know that the major disability categories, the impact of disabilities, how that student who is vision impaired, how is that student impacted? What are you as an educator going to do to provide services? Family system and structure, like how you're going to help the family, the parent out, the student development and the learning environment, and also the culture of the student. So just make sure that you dive deep into that. Planning and the learning environment, talk about lesson planning, curriculum access, learning environment. Managing student behavior is a key to this practice as well. Having measurable learning goals, how the in classroom environment is created to promote student achievement and instruction. We went over that. Assistive technology, preventive strategy for at-risk students, research-based intervention. And I can email this also to you all. I get to Ms. Perkins to email it to you if you all would like. So basically we went over those things. Does anyone have any questions before we move forward with the PowerPoints? These are just broken down into segments. And let's go back to the foundation and professional responsibilities. And I want to pause here because there is an indicator for pre-referral, referral, and identification. We talked about the RTI model. Does anyone know about the pre-referral method? How can you refer a student if you suspect them?
I'm learning about that right now in special education law.
First thing you have to do is you have to have observation on the students before you can refer them. Well, that's what we do. We have, hold on, baby. We do observation, like if the child's in gen ed, we do a gen ed observation through the teacher, and then we do if it's behavior, we do a behavior consultant, and then sometimes at times that we may ask the parent for parental input. Well, we don't ask, we ask for parental input for the child before we do a pre-referral. And then basically when I say the parental inputs, those kind of happen at like parent teacher conference. It's like you're asking a parent, but you're not asking a parent because you really don't have the permission yet to test the student or move forward. So you kind of do it kind of like a roundabout way. Is that right?
So you can probe for answers.
Yes.
And I would say yes. So you definitely can probe for answers. Of course, we can't say I suspect unless it's the parent has the same sentiments about it. But definitely observation, you're right. So make sure you have your observation sheets, your interviews, the data. That's the word you're going to hear a lot in SPED and also on the exam about data collecting. And then the referral model. How's that looking? How do you all, or have you all been taught the referral model? Have you all heard the S team?
Yes, the S team, I'm sorry. The S team is made up of the school psychologist, usually the school counselor and the LEA or the principal, assistant principal, and then the teacher, the gen ed teacher. I sat in on the S team meeting. It's either the special education teacher or the resource teacher, or mine is a specific program. I teach day treatment. So I sit on some of the S team meetings if the child has trauma or ED, or if there's an ED diagnosis.
Yes, thank you. So those people are components of the S team to determine whether or not the student may or may not need special education services. And so there's a referral process that the school district that has written exactly what the steps are. For example, observation, interviewing the parent, the student, not just observing the student in that classroom, but also in different areas like the hallway, the cafeteria, doing their exploratory or specialty classes, things of that nature. And then the psychologist will test the student, and then the team come back and see whether or not the student has a disability or not. And that's where the last component called identification comes about.
Okay, on my test, there wasn't any questions about the S team, but definitely know like what an occupational therapist does, a speech therapist does, and like what the different therapists and stuff like that are
Service providers.
The definition of them, and just know what they do and their stuff like that.
Yes, that goes back into the roles and responsibilities of people. So thank you for bringing it. And that's why we have these conversations, very informal, but I want you all to we can have this conversation. So as you have your constructive response, you can just remember and write down exactly what our conversation was or a different type of scenario to best fit that student or whoever the case may be for that scenario. And this right here, we just talked about constructive responses, instruction, assessment, the learning environment, classroom management, and collaboration. Does anyone have any questions or a comment regarding these components?
On the classroom management, be talking about how you would manage the behavior and like setting up your classroom for the academic part, as well as any type of behavior problems you may come up against.
Yeah, so classroom management is important, not only to set up the classroom, but they're going to talk about, or it may be a question regarding how are you collecting the data? What is the behavior, the types of behavior? So definitely go back into that particular SPED class where it's talking about the different types of behavior, what's your approach for that students, and how you're going to collect the data for that particular students. What's the difference between FBA and BIP? Right? What's an antecedent? Does a BIP come first?
Yes, those questions are, it's like about, I feel like it was about 30 questions on the test about like ABC. Yes, ABC, and like what comes before the B, what's after C, like all those kind and different events, like all that kind of stuff is definitely on there. So I was just about to mention that.
Yeah, so it's important to know. I know I talked to a few SPED teachers who were veteran teachers, and they was implementing BIPs before the FBA. Is like, no, this backwards. You have to have the functional behavior analysis first, so you can determine exactly how we can construct the BIP, and also the antecedent. You know, what's the antecedent like? Who's what? You know, when, where, why, and then the behavior of the student, and then the consequence of that behavior. So definitely go back and read over about the antecedent, the behavior, the consequence, the positive support system, PBIS, things of that nature. I know Dr. Hunter does a great job with the classroom management section in his class. I don't know if he's teaching that course this year or not, but definitely go back into whoever's teaching it.
What professor you say again?
Dr. Hunter.
He's my special education law professor.
Okay.
For this term, but I don't know what other classes he's teaching. And you say he teaches what class on?
We did teach classroom management, but I'm not for sure. Maybe Ms. Barnes or Dr. Davis, Dr. Falls, maybe, I'm not for sure. But go back, whoever's teaching the class. It changed throughout the semester. Who's teaching what class? Okay, Caitlin said you had a last semester, but yes, so definitely go back into those, the syllabi, and figure out exactly what you need to learn about classroom management. Collaboration, does anyone have any question regarding collaboration? This has been a great conversation, you all. I know the time is ticking, it's 5:11, so we're gonna try to wrap it up soon, but I wanted to make sure that we dive deeper so we can get you what you need to pass the tests.
When you say collaboration now, like where are you going with collaboration? Because I know on my test, I don't remember any questions on collaboration. So could you get more in details about that?
You have a student with an IEP, right? And a student's in an inclusion setting. So who should you collaborate with? You as a SPED teacher.
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned that because it does ask you a lot of questions about the different types of teachers, like general education, special education. Let me go back in my notes, but I'm glad that you mentioned that. Okay.
Anyone else?
So for that scenario, you're talking about the SPED teacher needs to collaborate with the gen ed teacher because that's inclusion and working that way. Would that include the other professionals on the IEP team, like if they have speech or OT? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Collaborating with all IEP team members. It's important to know, especially like not just a SPED teacher going to that gen ed teacher, but vice versa as well. And, you know, creating lesson planning. That's when you have your co-teaching strategies, because you and that gen ed teacher need to collaborate. And also there have been cases where I had my speech teacher to come in, we would co-teach together. She will create a lesson and I will follow her, and we will team teach together for our students, because I have taught a self-contained class for functional and adaptive functional skills students. So collaboration with all parts, like our people on the IEP team, is very vital. Does anyone else have any questions on that? And I know, Cole, you're looking up something on your notes.
Yes, because I just had the page. I'm trying to, because I know that it mentions different types of teachers, but it also, I don't know if we talked about this, but the alternative placements for students with disabilities, like we talked about, like the most restrictive, like least restrictive environment to most restrictive, but on the test, it's going to ask you, it's going to say like, which of the following would this best fit for this student? And like, and it describes the environment, and you have to say which, like if it's a residential school, separate classroom, resource room, general education. Yeah, so all this stuff. So
it's the same pyramid too, the continuum. We love
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So you have the bottom, which would be the least restricted environment, right? The least amount of support will be your gen ed, your inclusion. And then the further you go up, you're most restricted. So you have your gen ed classes, you would have, some schools have resources, resource class, and then you have your self-contained class, which is your functional skills or adaptive functional skill, depending on the IQ. So your functional skill classrooms are students who are mild to moderate, right? And then your adaptive functional skill classrooms are students who are your severe profound classes. And then you will have your STEP program for some school districts with your behavior disorder. They can be considered a self-contained classroom too. And I think you, Cameron, you teach a day treatment class, is that correct? It could be that goes up to the continuum as well to be most restrictive. And then you have your residential facilities, where I taught at youth village, I can't think of the name right now. I taught at youth villages as well for a student who has severe behavior disorder. So and then you have students who are hospitalized because of the behaviors. So
okay, so I found it. Okay, so so for placement option, there's, you know, the general education classroom, there's the consultant teacher. For some reason, this question was on, it asked about a consultant teacher on the test. And like basically the purpose of a consultant teacher.
So the consultant teacher, it could be someone far as like a SPED teacher pushing into a gen ed classroom to consult with a student. I had a few students before who only had maybe a few hours of SPED. And so that consultant teacher would go and visit that student or their child maybe once or twice a week. In some cases, it could be once or twice a month. So there will be a consulting teacher. Does anyone have any other questions regarding that? Okay, we only have a few more minutes, but I'm going to, I'm not going to do Kahoot with you all, but I'm going to share the Kahoot questions with you all. That's okay once I do the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. I know we kind of started late. But I do want to go ahead and just make sure you know you have a study plan. Make sure you have a study plan in place. Scale 1 through 5. How well do you know the content as you study through your study guide? What resources do you need? What do you have? Do you have the study guide for the Praxis book? Are you looking at different websites online for this exam, and where can you find them if you need them? And have anyone created a timeline to study? I know someone has a test this Saturday, so have you set up a timeline from 6 weeks ago until now to study for the exam?
I said I was gonna take it when I feel confident.
Okay.
I have a question. Do you know a lot about the mastering program? Just a quick question about the mastering program after you graduate and trying to do SPED.
Okay, what question do you have? I'm making assistance.
Okay, I have I guess I'm in a situation where I graduated in May, so, and I want to pass the Praxis, but worst case scenario, I don't pass.
Mhm.
What I was told that, of course, you would have to wait. If I want to retake the Praxis, I will have to wait all the way to next spring with the current seniors next spring to take the Praxis again. Is that
Okay.
correct?
That's not true.
No,
Oh,
like,
are you kidding me?
Yes.
Who said that?
I don't think that's accurate, but talk to
Chloe.
me about it. But
Girl,
all right, the Praxis test, you can take it how many times you want to take the Praxis test, as long as you have the
After
money.
I graduate?
After you, yes, ma'am, you can take the Praxis exam.
No way. No way. I'm so sorry. I'm freaking out right now. We've been, and I have other classmates who can vouch. We were told if you don't pass by a certain time, before graduation, you just don't get that, license, of course.
Oh yeah, you don't get the license if you don't
Yeah, no,
pass it. But as far as graduating, that's actually a great question. I would talk to Miss Lofty. Are you in the MAT program?
No.
Okay, well, I would talk to your
Yeah,
advisor about
that's
that 'cause I know they make changes all the time to the University
Mhm.
of Memphis education program. So I'm just being honest, but I would
Yeah.
really I would type that question out to your advisor so that way that she's
Yeah, to get some clarification on that. But as far as the
Mhm.
Praxis, I think you can take. Now I do know, because I teach undergraduates here. There's certain type of assessment you have to take in order to take certain courses as an undergraduate.
See what? No, I'm graduating. I'm getting my bachelor's in May, but I was told if I don't pass the Praxis, of course I'll still be graduating. I just want to get that teacher,
Right.
which I understand that. I know that. But if I want to retake the Praxis to get my license to teach, I will have to wait until next spring for the seniors that's coming up next spring who will be graduating 2023.
That's not true because
That's what I was saying.
my Praxis test probably sometime next month. But I know that with the ETS, like they want you, like if you don't pass, they want you to wait like a certain amount of time. But as long as you retake your test within, I think like 21 days, or like you have to retake it
2 or
after
3
21
weeks.
days. I would ask ETS about that. That's an ETS question because they're
Okay.
the ones you have to. Yes.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought that up, but yes, definitely reach out to your advisor and contact ETS regarding the licensure.
Okay.
Yeah. As far as retaking the test, being able to retake it.
Okay. Thank y'all.
You're welcome. That's why we're here. Any other questions? All right. Well, this is it, you all. Remember to study and be prepared, breathe, be confident, and conquer the exam. I will play the Kahoot game for a few minutes. If those who want to stay around to be quizzed on it, that's fine. But those who cannot understand, be safe in this weather. But I'm going to stop sharing the screen and I'm going to go ahead and play the Kahoot game for a few minutes and then go from there. But those who are taking an exam Saturday or soon, best of luck to you all, okay? Just a moment. Let me share my screen again. Let me get my sound together first and foremost. I don't hear anything. Give me just a moment.
I have a quick question.
Uh-huh.
I have a class that starts at 5:30. Is it okay if I go ahead and leave?
Absolutely. That's the reason why I push. So those who want to stay along, they can play the Kahoot game. I'm sending this out to you all, along with the PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you. You're welcome. Everyone else want to play you all?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, so which of the following is required component of IEP? Annual goals are a must. Okay, under IDEA, which of the following age groups are qualified to receive early intervention service? Yes, it starts from birth to 2 years old. Any students can qualify from that age group to receive services for special education. The other groups, you can qualify anytime, but to receive the early intervention is birth to 0. I mean, birth to 2. It's been a long day. Okay, which of the following activities is the best example of a summative? Yes, the end of a chapter test, the end of a unit. Very good. All right, so which one is the best example of differentiating instruction? Those under your planning component. Right, assigning students to certain parts of the chapter book for a read aloud, that is differentiating instruction. Okay, so which of the following would be most important for daily living skills for a high school? Yes, using a microwave oven. Can anyone tell us why? Why is that a daily living skill?
Because you have to be able to warm up your food.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a daily,
Absolutely. That's important for our students' ID diagnosis. So which one is an accurate statement for IDA required for an IEP? Right, we must, an IP must be in effect before any type of services is in existence. I know sometimes principal push students in the SPED classes, but it should not be the case. We have to have documentation for students to receive any related or SPED services.
This question was on the test.
Good. So yeah, so a student with ASD, they need a visual schedule. Now we talked about beforehand that student with autism, they need to be consistent. They need to have some type of daily routine to help them be successful. All right. So Jamie is a first grade student with SLD in math. She's learned to add. So what will be the best accommodation for her? Yes, using manipulatives, right? We need to make sure that she understands that she have to have certain concrete strategies to help her build her skills in elementary school to help her in high school. Good job. Okay, which one is the most appropriate and productive communication between SPED teachers and Absolutely. Teaching 101 always starts with the positive, right? Use the strengths of the child first. All right, absolutely, involuntary movement. So I'm going to stop that, the Kahoot game. Like I said before, I'm going to send the PowerPoint and the Kahoot information to Mrs. Perkins so you all can quiz yourselves to prepare you for your Praxis exam, okay?